Hey guys, it's Greg Jones for Engine Builder. Today we are at the Crawford Auto Museum in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm joined by John Lutsch. Behind us is a one-of-one custom Panoz Roadster with a 351 Ford Windsor V8, and it's our Engine of the Week.
Engine Builder's Engine of the Week is sponsored by Pen Grade 1, L-Ring DOS Original, and NPW.
John, thanks so much for having us out to the Crawford Auto Museum here today. Tons of cool cars and motorcycles in the collection, plenty to see, but behind us here is something really special because this is the only one that there is.
It's the only one.
And it's a Panoz Roadster, and it took 13 years to build and put together.
13 years to build. It's really interesting. It's actually, the correct name is Panozster.
Okay.
So it's a combination of Panos, which provided the chassis, and Roadster, so it's the Panozster.
Gotcha.
It's a little bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, I'm struggling just with the Panos pronunciation, so I appreciate that.
Sure. So it is a labor of love. It's an amazing tour de force in terms of panel beating. This, aside from the existing Panos chassis, and for those who don't know, Panos was and still is, a very high-end American manufacturer of competition cars. And by competition, I mean like cars that would race at Le Mans. So they participated in Le Mans for many, many years and were very successful. That racing effort has since fallen off, but they had one chassis left over, and the gentleman who built the car was able to purchase that chassis from them and actually got technical help putting the car together.
Yeah.
But all the body work that you see is hand-formed aluminum that was beaten over wooden body bucks.
Wow.
So that kind of fabrication skill these days is really hard to find.
Yeah.
And it was all done locally. So it was an amazing project. And if you look closely at the body work, you know, your first impression is, oh, well, that's a really interesting fiberglass car. It's not. It's all aluminum.
Yeah.
And, you know, when the paintwork is that flawless and the seams are that flawless and the little detail ridges and stuff, to do it all by hand is an astonishing piece of work.
Absolutely, yeah.
So 13 years.
13 years in the making, absolutely. Well, it definitely shows it's gorgeous. We'll get back to the car itself in a second, but obviously we want to kick it off here with the Ford engine that they chose to put in it. It's a 351 Windsor V8 that I understand got bored out to 427 cubic inches?
That's correct, yes. And aside from the performance upgrade, it actually, there's an aviation theme to the car, which we'll investigate a little bit later, but one of the aviation keys is the Continental aircraft engine valve covers. That was all custom fabricated, and they're actually really Continental valve covers. They're not reproductions.
Yeah, that's very cool.
So the whole upper manifold area, the head area, is all custom fab too. So it's a really amazing piece of work in terms of the engine. And I can tell you, since I've traveled in this car, that it puts the power to the ground very effectively.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I bet. And then also up top, you got boreless stack intake and injection there.
Yeah, it's actually visually created to replicate the group of stacked Webers that would be on a vintage, like a vintage 289 Cobra, for example. This is an injected car, so, but you know, the visual cues are there for like an early 60s kind of engine configuration. I think it's really successful. I mean, from a distance, it looks like a bunch of Webers sitting up there. So
yeah, it certainly does.
It's pretty cool.
And then I would have to imagine, you know, they went through all this effort, you know, just on the top end of the engine, that inside they've probably got some custom parts and really
I wish I could tell you all of the exact technical specs of the engine, but it's been pretty well massaged to pump out some serious horsepower.
Yeah.
It'll peel your eyeballs back in your head. It's kind of scary.
I'm sure it's a blast to drive and ride in. Yeah.
She goes.
Yeah. So, John, you know, the engine's one thing, you know, it's really cool what they did there. But again, coming back to the car, which is, you know, the only one of its kind, talk a little bit more about just some of the design cues and what went into it. Again, we were talking about some of the aircraft personality that's in it in different areas.
Right.
Elaborate on a little bit of that.
Well, the first thing that kind of strikes you is that is the seating. The seating are basically aluminum shells that very much look like fighter plane seats.
Yeah.
But they've been very beautifully hand upholstered to, you know, I mean, you don't want to be sitting in raw aluminum.
Yeah.
So it's got beautiful leather upholstery in those seats. The leather pretty much works its way around the cockpit into the doors. The dashboard actually has aviation instruments in it. The shift lever is 1/2 of an aircraft yoke, like a flying steering wheel almost.
Yeah.
So they took half of it and turned it into the gear lever.
That's pretty neat.
And you can see it's got the remote shift linkage in there.
Yeah.
So the aviation cues are pretty evident once you work your way back into the cockpit. And it's a really interesting, to me anyway, it's a very interesting amalgamation of sort of a 1950s hot rod aesthetic combined with aviation elements, which you don't see very often in cars.
Yeah, certainly.
It's pretty cool.
And then you were telling me before we got on camera that even like the headlights are from a Harley motorcycle.
Yeah, the headlights are Harley V-rods.
Yeah. So it's got these cool elements from different aspects of automotive and aviation as well as motorcycles. So super, super cool. John, anything else big that we're leaving out? Obviously, there's probably a lot, but I think we kind of hit the main things.
Eventually, if we get some close-ups, you should really take a look at some of the interior bracing of the hood. It's very aircraft looking. It's all, you know, drilled aluminum.
Yeah.
And there really isn't one square inch on this car that hasn't been very carefully thought about and very carefully designed. Everything fits together absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
And so you have a real treasure in terms of not only a cool car, but kind of a living example of the highest form and the highest quality of metalworking.
Yeah.
It's a tour de force.
Yeah. Well, again, you know, kudos to the builder and, you know, the 13 years that it took. And I understand it was somewhere around the $300,000 mark to put it all together.
That was the investment level. Yeah, it's worth a lot more now as a finished unit.
As it should be, yeah.
But it took a lot to get it here, and we're delighted that it's spending a little bit of time with us. I can't wait to get back in it again. But it's a real beast.
Awesome. Well, John, we appreciate you telling us a little bit about the Panozster, as well as the 427 Ford Windsor V8 here. So we appreciate it.
Sure.
Guys, we appreciate you watching this episode of Engine of the Week. Make sure you're checking out the Crawford Auto Museum for everything that they've got going on. And if you're ever in the Cleveland area, definitely come check it out. And as always, make sure you're checking out enginebuildermag.com for more great engine content. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks.